Good morning, everyone. My name is ARPAN BANERJEE. I'm a doctoral fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and academic counselor here at IGNOU. And I've been teaching you this paper, the code of which is BPSC 132. And the name of this paper is Indian Government and Politics. So in this paper, let us see what we have done so far. Let us go through all that. So far in this paper, we have discussed the first block, which was pertaining to approaches to study Indian politics. And as part of that, we had discussed three approaches, which formed three units in that first block. So those were liberal, Marxist, and Gandhian approaches to study Indian politics. Moving on, in the next unit, which was pertaining to the Indian Constitution, we studied the basic features of the Indian Constitution, the fundamental rights that have been enshrined in the Constitution of India, the directive principles of state policy, and the fundamental duties. Moving on, in the third block, we have discussed the institutions, that is the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. And in the last class, we had discussed block 4, and as part of block 4, we had discussed two units. Unit 10, which was pertaining to caste, class, and tribe, and unit 11, which was pertaining to gender. In today's class, we are going to begin with unit 12, which is pertaining to workers and farmers. And after that, we are going to discuss unit 13, which is a part of block 5, that is religion and politics. And unit 13 is pertaining to secularism. So let us begin with unit 12, that is workers and farmers. So workers and peasants, they together form the largest group of the Indian society. We all know that. While workers, they largely belong to the exploited section, the peasants consist of both poor as well as rich sections. These groups have been involved in the collective actions or the social and political movements to get their demands fulfilled. The nature of the issues raised by them or their leadership depends on the place they occupy in the economy or society. It also depends on the fact whether the workers are engaged in the organized, unorganized, agrarian, or industrial sectors, or whether a peasant is poor peasant or rich peasant, operating in the mechanized capitalist economy or in the backward feudal economy. So in this unit, we shall be discussing the important features of the workers and peasants movements in India. So now let us first start with the workers movement. So the workers movement in India can be divided in two phases, the pre-independence period and the post-independence period. So let us first discuss the workers' movements in the colonial period. So the modern working class made its appearance in India in the second half of the 19th century with the growth of modern industries, railways, postal system, as well as telegraph network, plantation, and mining. But the labor movement started in an organized way only after the Second World War. So the first labor organization, which was called the Bharat Shram Jeevi, it was started in the 1870s by a person called Shashipad Banerjee in Calcutta. The organized sector or workers union are known as the trade unions. So the All India Trade Union Congress, AITUC, was formed in 1920. Its objective was to coordinate activities of all organizations in all the provinces of India to further the interests of the Indian labor in economic, social, and political matters. In the second half of the 1920s, there was a consolidation of left ideological forces in the country. In 1928, the left wing, including the communists, they succeeded in acquiring a dominant position inside the All India Trade Union Congress. So the moderates, they started a new organization known as the All India Trade Union Federation. So, or the AITUF. So the 1930s was not a favorable period for the growth of trade union movement of India. The communists, they were implicated in the Meerut conspiracy, and the communists were implicated in the Meerut conspiracy case and the Bombay textile strike of 1929. It had also failed. So a lull marked the activities on the trade union front. The serious economic depression of this period added to the woes of the workers further, and it led to large-scale retrenchment as well. So the main focus of the trade union movements during this period was maintaining wages and preventing retrenchment. So the Second World War, it divided the trade union leaders. The communists, they argued that with the Nazi attack on the Soviet Union in 1941, the character of the war had changed from imperialist to people's war. So this is what was argued by the communists, that the Nazi attack on Soviet Union changed the character of the war from imperialist war to people's war. The communists were following the line of the Russian Communist Party, which was under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, and thought that in the changed circumstances, it was the duty of the workers to support British war efforts. But the nationalist leaders, they wanted to strengthen the national movement to overthrow the British rule from India. The ideological rift led to another split in the trade union movement. The mounting cost of living made the workers realize the need of an organized effort to secure relief. In spite of the government resorting to defense of India rules, which prohibited strikes and lockouts, there was a perceptible increase in the number of both unions and organized workers. So now let us discuss the issues and the types of collective actions. The main issues which caused the workers' strikes included wage, bonus, personnel, leave and hours of work, violence and indiscipline, industrial and labor policies, etc. The workers, they take recourse to various types of collective actions for getting their problems redressed. These are strikes, satyagraha, hunger strike, bandh, hartal, gherao, demonstration, mass casual leave, work to rule, cutting of supply of electricity, etc. The most common form of workers' collective action is the strike. So there are examples of the railway strike, jute strike, plantation, mine and textile worker strikes in the pre-independence period. The centers of these strikes were Nagpur in Maharashtra, Ahmedabad in Gujarat, Mumbai in Maharashtra, Madras, that is Chennai in Tamil Nadu, Howrah in Calcutta in West Bengal, and Calcutta in West Bengal as well. In 1920s, Mahatma Gandhiji intervened in the strike of the textile workers of Ahmedabad and provided leadership to the workers. So there, a very important role was also played by the first female trade union leader of India, that is Anusuya Sarabhai. She also played a very important role in resolving the workers' issues in Ahmedabad mill strike when Gandhiji also gave his leadership. So now let us discuss society and politics. So workers' movements in the post-colonial period. Now let us discuss them a little. And first of all, we'll discuss the workers' movement in the post-colonial period at the national level. So the high hopes of workers, they were shattered after independence. There was hardly any improvement on the fronts of better wages and other service conditions. Three central trade union organizations were born. So what were they? The Indian National Trade Union Congress, INTUC, was started by Congress Party. It was born in 1947. The Praja Socialist Party, it started the Hind Mazdoor Sabha in 1948. The workers had to struggle hard even to retain what they had achieved earlier. So a series of strikes stirred the country. There were highest number of strikes in 1947, that is 1,811 strikes, which involved 1,840,000 workers. The number of strikes and man days lost had surpassed all the previous records. This declined in the 1950s, but number of strikes and lockouts increased again in the 1960s and 1970s. Some radicalists had formed the United Trade Union Congress, UTUC, in 1949. After 1964, when there was a division in the Communist Party of India, and Communist Party of India Marxist was born. This led to a split in the communist control AITUC as well. And in 1970, the Center for Indian Trade Unions, that is CITU, was born. They are affiliated to the Communist Party of India Marxist. So according to the provisional figures released by the Chief Labour Commissioner in 1994, Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh, BMS, which is an affiliate of BJP, acquired a total membership of 31.17 lakh workers, securing the top position. The Indian Trade Union Congress, a Congress affiliated body with a total membership of 27.06 lakh, is in the second position. The third position is enjoyed by the Communist India Trade Union, CITU, which is affiliated to Communist Party of India Marxist, with a total membership of 17.98 lakh. And the fourth position is enjoyed by the Hind Mazdoor Sabha, which belonged to the erstwhile Praja Socialist Party. Now let us discuss the trade unions at the provincial level. So another remarkable development of the 1960s was the birth of trade unions of the regional parties, like the Dravid Munnetra Kazhagam and the All India Anna Dravid Munnetra Kazhagam in Madras, which is today's Chennai. The Shiv Sena of Maharashtra, it was born in Mumbai, which was called Bombay back then, in 1967. It soon set up its labor wing called Bharatiya Kamgar Sena. It was generally believed that the Shiv Sena had the backing of the industrial houses in Bombay, Pune belt to counter the strong influence of the communists and socialists in labor unions. The Shiv Sena succeeded in achieving this objective, and its trade union established its supremacy in the Bombay region by mid-1970s. The predominance of the Shiv Sena-led union was successfully challenged by Datta Samant, an eminent Indian National Trade Union Congress leader. When emergency was imposed in 1975, he refused to tone down his militancy. He was arrested and sent to jail. Then he was a Congress MLA. After coming out of jail when the emergency was lifted in 1977, he became even more popular. By the end of 1970s, he became the most powerful trade union leader in Bombay Pune belt. In the year 1978, he left both Congress and Indian National Trade Union Congress to set up an independent union named the Maharashtra Girni Kamgar Union, MGKU. He remained one of the most influential trade union leader in Bombay till he was murdered. Now let us discuss the trade unions without political affiliations. The 1960s also witnessed the emergence of independent or apolitical unions. They were independent in the sense that they were not affiliated to any political party or federation. These kinds of apolitical trade unions emerged out of the dissatisfaction of the workers with the existing trade unions which were affiliated to the political parties. The leadership of these unions has largely come from the educated middle classes. Engineering Mazdoor Sabha, led by R.J. Mehta, was one of the earliest unions of this type, covering workers in engineering, chemical, and printing and allied industries. So Datta Samant started a number of unions like Association of Engineering Workers, Mumbai General Kamgar Union, Maharashtra Girni Kamgar Union, Shankar Guha Niyogi, and A.K. Roy also came into limelight as leaders of independent unions. Niyogi concentrated on mobilizing contract workers in the iron ore mines of Dalli Rajhara near Bhilai in Madhya Pradesh, while All India Trade Union Congress and Indian National Trade Union Congress were concerned with the problems of permanent and better paid workers of the Bhilai steel plant. Niyogi concentrated on casual workers employed in small and medium scale industries in the region. Niyogi was murdered in 1990. Another example of this type is A.K. Roy, who organized coal mine workers in Dhanbad, Jharia belt of Bihar. Roy's support base was also among contract and casual laborers in the coal mines. Roy also received support from a large number of local tribal mine workers because the trade unions operating in these areas did not satisfy them. Another important example of this type was the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEVA, formed by Ila Bhatt. She founded SEVA because she felt that unions in the organized sector were not sensitive to the problems encountered by female workers. So one of the most important examples of the movement launched by the union, which was not affiliated to the political parties, was the textile workers strike of 1982 in Mumbai. So dissatisfied with the Rashtriya Mil Mazdoor Sangh, RMMS, affiliated to the Indian National Trade Union Congress, the workers of the textile industries in Mumbai rallied behind the Maharashtra Girni Kamgar Union, led by Datta Samant. So the workers of the textile workers of Mumbai, they went on an indefinite strike on January 18, 1982. The demands of the workers included higher wages, making the badli, that is temporary workers, permanent, allowances for leave and travel, and payment for house rent. The workers of other sectors than the textile also rallied behind Datta Samant. The industrialists adopted intransigent attitude towards the strike. The strike had its repercussion on the rural areas to which the workers belonged. The textile workers also were poor peasants or small farmers having links both in cities as well as villages. Datta Samant was able to link the rural issues like wages of agricultural laborer with those of the textile workers. The strike, however, did not succeed in getting the original demands of the workers accepted, but it helped Datta Samant to emerge as the most influential trade union leader in Mumbai. Now let us discuss some limitations of the trade union movement in India. The trade union movement in India is faced with many limitations. Only a small fraction of the working class is organized. Even in the organized sector, a sizable chunk of workers do not participate in trade union movement. Indian economy is largely agriculture based. Small peasants and agricultural labor encounter the problems of seasonal unemployment and low income. They are forced to go to cities in search of employment. if we discuss about society and politics, we'll also see that most of these workers, they are illiterate and ignorant and are under the grip of superstitions, and they have a migratory character. A large section of the workers, they do not show much interest in trade union movement because city life for them is a temporary condition. So they do not realize the importance of unity among workers. Another major weakness of trade union is poor finance. This is a fact that working class in India is a very small part of the population, but the main problem is the multiplicity of trade unions. The subscription rate of membership by Indian workers is small in comparison to their numbers. This makes the trade unions dependent on external finance and influence. Another weakness of trade union movement has been the dominance of leadership from outside. The main reason for this has been lack of education amongst workers. Mostly leadership is provided by professional politicians. It is being increasingly felt that the working class movement should be led by persons from the ranks of the workers who are aware of the problems and difficulties that are being encountered by the working class. So now let us discuss the peasant movements. Peasants are those agrarian classes which are related to agriculture as the tenants or owners of land and participate in the farming activities as well. So they are a differentiated group. In the backward and feudal agriculture, they cultivate land as the tenants of the landlords. In the more advanced agriculture, where the tenants have become the landowners following the implementation of land reforms, they are the owners of the land. So in the backward areas, they are the basically tenants. In the more advanced agricultural areas, where due to land reforms and land ceilings, they have become landowners. So we have these two kinds of peasants in our country. So the peasants whose resources in the land are not enough to meet their basic needs and who also work as laborers for others, apart from working on their fields, they are poor and small peasants. The peasants who do not work for wages but have enough resources relating to agriculture, they are rich and middle peasants or the farmers. They either mainly depend on the family labor to work on the land, or they may combine it with the hired labor from outside the family. So in this section, we shall be studying the movements of the small and poor peasants as well as those of the rich peasants or the farmers. So let us first discuss the small and poor peasant movements. So there were several peasant movements both in pre-independence and post-independence periods. Some examples of the former are the Awadh movement of Uttar Pradesh or United Provinces, which the name by which it was known in 1920. The Kheda and Bardoli movements of Gujarat and the Champaran movement of Bihar, as well as the Mopla rebellion. The main example of the post-independence period are the Telangana movement, which took place in Andhra Pradesh 1946, the Tebhaga movement and the Naxalite movements of West Bengal. The peasants during the pre-independence period were living in the miserable social and economic conditions. They were exploited by a group of classes, example, landlords and their agents, money lenders and officials of the colonial state. The landlords increased the rents on the peasants continuously, took forced gifts and extracted begar from them. So the inability of the peasants to pay these multiplied due to the frequent famines and drought which affected them adversely. They were heavily indebted to the moneylenders in order to pay the rent and meet the needs of their subsistence. When the peasants could not pay the rents, services, or the begar, they were evicted from the land. They were also physically tortured. Commercialization of crops and introduction of new land rules further worsened their conditions. The peasants reacted to by revolting against landlords, moneylenders, and agents of the colonial state. Leadership in the peasant movement was provided either by the rural intelligentsia or urban intelligentsia. Baba Ramchand, the leader of the Awadh peasant movement, belonged to the former. The peasants had been mobilized by some organizations. In case there was no organization, some kind of informal networking of peasants and their leaders had worked as organization. This was true especially for the localized revolts. The informal networking of the organizational structure worked in mobilization, communication of the messages, and in planning strategies and programs. From the beginning of the 20th century, different political parties mobilized the peasants in the revolts. The Congress started mobilizing the peasants from 1920s with the purpose of to broaden its support base. This enabled peasant movements which were localized and running parallel to the national movement to merge with the latter. Now, the Bardoli Satyagraha of 1928, no rent campaigns were example of such merger, but the Congress did not encourage the conflict between landlord and peasants to get sharpened. So Gandhiji, he gave the theory of economic trusteeship, where the landlord and the tenant, they would both cooperate and live like family members. He asked the landlords to treat the tenant as their own children. And Gandhiji said that the landlord is not actually the owner of the land, rather he is the trustee of the land. So this is the theory of economic trusteeship. So the Congress did not encourage the conflict between landlords and peasants to get sharpened. The Congress had been more interested in forging an alliance between the landlords, peasants, and other classes. After the civil disobedience movement, radical nationalists and many leaders of peasant movement started sharing the impression that Congress was sympathetic towards capitalists and zamindars. The need to evolve independent class organizations and leadership to safeguard the interests of the peasants was being felt by them. This was under the circumstances that the first All India peasant organization, the All India Kisan Sabha, was formed in 1936 under these circumstances in Lucknow under the presidentship of Swami Sajanand Saraswati, the founder of the Bihar Pradesh Kisan Sabha. N.G. Ranga, the pioneer of the Kisan movement in Andhra, became its first general secretary. The birth of an all India organization with a program of common demands and so the birth of an all India organization with a program of common demands and expressing the aspirations of peasants all over the country was an event of great historical significance. Very soon, the branches of the All India Kisan Sabha were established in many districts. The formation of Congress ministries in a majority of the provinces in early 1937 marked the beginning of a new phase in growth of peasant movements. The Congress had promised radical improvements in the condition of peasants on the eve of elections. There was definite increase in civil liberties, which provided better opportunities for mobilization of peasantry. Different Congress ministries introduced agrarian legislations for debt relief, restoration of land lost during depression, for security of tenure, etc. But these measures did not affect the conditions of the peasants of the lower strata. They only benefited the peasants of the upper strata. The dissatisfaction of peasants found expression in a number of protest meetings, conferences, and demonstrations. They criticized a number of anti-peasant measures taken by the government, like arrest of peasant leaders and banning peasant meetings. The outbreak of World War II brought the resignation of Congress ministries and launching of severe repression against Kisan Sabha leaders. In 1939, The National Convention of All India Kisan Sabha was presided over by Acharya Narendra Dev. In his presidential address, he emphasized the need of separation of Kisan Sabha from Congress. According to him, a separate Kisan Sabha was necessary in order to put pressure on the Congress. So the end of the war, followed by negotiation for transfer of power and anticipation of freedom, marked a new stage in history of peasant movements. Approaching freedom had filled the peasant movement with new spirit to assert their rights. The analysis of some of these movements gives us sufficient insight into the nature, social basis, achievements, and limitations of the peasant movements in India. The Tebhaga movement of Bengal was one such movement. The Provincial Kisan Sabha of Bengal launched this movement in 1946. Gradually, the influence of the left in general and communists in particular increased in the Kisan Sabha. In 1947, the leadership of All India Kisan Sabha went into the hands of the communists. The communists led the Provincial Kisan Sabha of Bengal also. This movement soon took the form of a clash between the Bargadars or sharecroppers and the Jotdars, the employers. The sharecroppers began to assert that they would no longer pay a half share of their crop to their Jotdars but only 1/3. They also insisted that before division, the crops would be stored in their khamars or godowns and not in that of the Jotdars. Poor peasants, middle peasants, and also some sons of Jotdars led the movement. The middle peasants provided the bulk of the leaders and they supported the movement up to the end. They hoped that it would culminate in total attack on landlordism. When the government resorted to severe repression in 1947, the movement came to an end. Another such movement was the Telangana movement. It was launched in 1946 in the princely state of Hyderabad, ruled by Nizam. This movement developed in the context of the post-war economic crisis. This movement started as a protest against collection of excessive revenue using force by the Jagirdars. In the beginning, the leadership was in the hands of the rich peasants, and the movement was directed against the big absentee landlords allied to the Nizam Shahi. But very soon, the initiative passed the hands of poor peasants and agricultural labor that started occupying lands and landlords and wastelands and started distributing it among them. So very soon the initiative passed into the hands of poor peasants and agricultural labor that started occupying lands of landlords and wastelands as well and started distributing it among them. By 1947, this movement organized a guerrilla army mobilizing poor peasantry and agricultural labor, many of which were tribal and untouchables. This army snatched large quantity of arms from the zamindars and subdued the local government officials. They established their control over an area of 15,000 square miles with a population of 40,000. The administrations in these areas were run by peasant soviets. The Army of Independent India succeeded in crushing the Telangana movement in 1951. In 1967, there started a peasant protest at a place called Naxalbari in the Darjeeling district of West Bengal. After 2 decades of independence and Congress rule, there was disenchantment amongst people on a large scale, which found expression in the defeat of the Congress in the 1967 elections in 8 states. But the communists had done well in both Kerala and West Bengal. The per capita income was on decline and unemployment was on rise. And a group of young communists, due to theoretical disputes within Communist Party of India and Communist Party of India Marxists' policy of participation in 1967 election, they joined the Naxalite movement and emphasized the need of armed struggle with peasantry as the leading element. The peasant organization of the Communist Party of India Marxist in Darjeeling district was in the hands of such communist leaders. The land reform policy of the government had not succeeded in taking lands from zamindars and big farmers and distributing amongst poor peasants and landless labor in any significant way. There existed discontent amongst peasants. In such a situation, the leaders of peasant organization gave a call for establishing the government of peasant committees, organizing armed struggle to end the ownership of the jotdars on land and distribute it among poor peasants and landless labor. They drew inspiration from the Telangana movement. The Naxalbari movement reached its zenith by third week of May 1967. There was violence on a large scale. Naxalbari got enormous publicity largely because it was fighting a state government wherein Communist Party of India Marxist was a major coalition partner along with the Bangla Congress. Ajay Mukherjee was the chief minister and Jyoti Basu was the deputy chief minister. And also because China believed that the Naxalites were following the line. It lasted for 52 days only. In July 1967, police and battalions of paramilitary forces sent by Chief Minister of Bengal at that time, Ajay Mukherjee, who was the in July 1967, police and battalions of paramilitary forces sent by Ajay Mukherjee, the then Chief Minister of the state, combed the whole area and the rebellion was suppressed. Naxalbari was a minor event in terms of its durations, intensity and resistance, area controlled or number of casualties suffered or inflicted on the other side. Naxalbari movement had its reverberations in several parts of the country. After this, the revolutionaries who became active in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab, Kashmir, Kerala and Andhra Pradesh came to be known as Naxalites. It emerged as a more powerful force in Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Bihar as well as Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh as well. Society and politics. So the emergence of Naxalism, it led to the formation of the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, which is the third Communist Party. This party believed that the goal of socialism could be achieved only through armed struggle and it also believed in the justified use of violence for capturing lands of zamindars and distributing them among poor peasants. The Naxalite movement became a reference point for those poor peasants and landless labor that got nothing from the government except promises and whose condition showed no signs of improvement and were suffering oppressions at the hands of rural dominant sections. So they found a ray of hope in this militant philosophy. This philosophy continues to inspire that segment of rural population who has lived at the receiving end. At many places, they are fighting for security, employment, minimum wages, rights over a share of produce and against sexual abuse of their women. There are instances of violence when they exercise their right to vote. The second phase of land reform as the Land Act started from 1961 onwards with the stated objective of distributing land among the landless. After the Naxalbari movement of 1967 and the land grab movements launched in different states of 1970, the need to impose rigorous land selling was realized. As early as in 1969, the Home Minister had warned that if steps were not taken to lessen agrarian tension, both by the state and the central government, things would go beyond control. So land reforms was essential part of the 20-point program of Mrs. Indira Gandhi during emergency period. But in spite of all this, by 1977, only 4.04 million acres were declared surplus. Out of this, 2.10 million acres were taken over by the government and merely 1.29 million acres were actually distributed. The much acclaimed Green Revolution did not make much of a difference in their condition. The percentage of households below poverty line in rural areas has gone up from 38.11 in 60-61 to 48% in 1977-78. So agricultural laborer, it continues to be their main income, and most of the studies suggest that there has been a marked decline. Most of the studies suggest that there has been a marked decline in both real wages and the days of work. So Naxalite outfits are active in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. Many times they indulge in mindless militancy, but they continue to inspire the underdogs of rural society because mostly they take up the problems faced by these sections. They take up the problems of the agricultural laborers, poor peasants, contract laborers, whether Dalits, tribals. They struggle for wages, land, and against oppression of different types. Their movements are weak and divided. Now let us discuss some of the rich peasants and farmers movement. So the last quarter of the 20th century has seen the movements of a very important social group in the rural areas known as the rich peasants, farmers, kulaks, or capitalist farmers in regions of India. They rallied behind the farmers' organizations in their respective regions. These organizations are the two Bharatiya Kisan Unions, the BKUs of Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, the Shetkari Sangathan of Maharashtra, the Khadyut Samaj of Gujarat, the Karnataka Rajya Raita Sangha of Karnataka, and the Vivasaigal of Tamil Nadu. The most prominent leaders of these unions were Bhupendra Singh Mann of Punjab, Mahendra Singh Tikait in Uttar Pradesh, Sharad Joshi in Maharashtra, and Nandunjappa Swami in Karnataka. These farmers are the most influential and resourceful sections of rural society in their respective regions. They largely belong to the intermediate castes. They have benefited most from the state, especially the land reforms and the green revolution. They cultivate land with the family labor supported by hired labor. They control the maximum resources in rural society, that is land, water, resources, animals, modern technologies like tractors, etc. The movements of rich farmers, unlike the movements of poor peasants, are not directed against any rural exploiters. In fact, a large group of them belong to the latter. These are directed against the state and unequal terms of trade. Their main demands have remunerative prices, subsidized inputs, writing off loans, lowering of electricity bills, substantial reduction in water canal charges, representation of farmers in agricultural price commission. With the exception of Maharashtra, these movements did not raise the problems of small producers. Rather, Tikait has demanded scrapping of land ceiling laws and of the Minimum Wages Act. The most common mode of mobilization in the farmers or rich peasants movements include rallies, satyagraha, road blocking, Gao Bandi, banning the entry of outsiders into the villages, and attack on the public property. Sometimes these result in violence. Their apolitical nature, which means they are not being attached to the political parties, has been the most effective method of mobilization, especially in the initial phase of the movements. While the farmers' movements in India shared several common characteristics, for example, they raised the market-oriented demands, their apolitical nature, their direction against the state patterns of mobilization. The Bharatiya Kisan Union movement of Uttar Pradesh was distinct in terms of leadership and involvement of the traditional institution. Mahendra Singh Tikait, the chief of the Uttar Pradesh Bharatiya Kisan Union, was also the hereditary head of the traditional caste organization known as the Sarva Khap of the farming Jats. His social position enabled him to become the leader of the Bharatiya Kisan Union at a time when the farmers of Uttar Pradesh did not have a leader of that stature in the wake of the death of former Prime Minister Chaudhry Charan Singh in 1987. Ticket was able to involve the traditional leaderships or Khap chiefs of several farming castes under the banner of the Bharatiya Kisan Union. Besides, the Bharatiya Kisan Union also took up the social issues like dowry in the initial phase of its movement. The Bharatiya Kisan Union of Mahendra Singh Tikat speaks a language that involves elements of Chaudhry Charan Singh's discourse on agriculture. Chaudhry Charan Singh used to argue that there was an urban bias in Indian planning and held it accountable for diversion of resources from agriculture. It, however, does not go to the extent of treating industrial and urban India against the rural India, unlike the Shetkari Shangathan of Sharad Joshi. The rich peasant organizations do not admit any contradiction between interest of rich peasant and poor agrarian classes. They argue that unremunerative prices affect both rich and poor peasants, while the Shetkari Shangathan maintains a facade of India and Bharat divide to hide the class divide in agriculture. The Bharatiya Kisan Union conceals it under the cover of existing Bhaichara, brotherhood, and peasant proprietorship in western Uttar Pradesh. The movement of rich peasant has become an important fact of the present day Indian polity, of the present day Indian reality as well. No political party can afford to displease them. The government's decision to enhance electricity rates for farmers, raising fertilizer prices are met with stiff resistance as well. Many times they resort to stoppage of the supply of commodities like onion, sugar, or milk to get their demands conceded. One thing has become obvious, that there has been a tremendous increase in the power of this class. They not only exploit the labor power and control majority of land, they also control levers of power like Gram Panchayat, Zila Parishad, cooperatives, and educational institutions and banks to get maximum benefit from these institutions. They also maintain their dominant position in the rural areas as well. The rich farmers are diversifying their sources of income. Some of their income comes from outside the agrarian sector, like employment in cities, rent, trade, money lending, or transport. They also invest in small industries like sugar and rice mills, as well as in food processing and related industries. And they enhance the scope and significance of these industries as well, based on their rural location. And also they are involved in the upstream and downstream requirements and the supply chain management as well. Now let us discuss the impact of liberalization on the workers and peasant movements. The economic reforms in the country that came to be known as liberalization can be said to be mainly in the 1990s development. The era of reforms or liberalization, privatization, and globalization, LPG reforms, started with the government of Pamulaparthi Venkat Narasimha Rao. Since then, successive governments have continued with the liberalization agenda. The government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee also committed to this agenda. Amongst the main planks of this new economic policy were closure of sick and loss-making public enterprises, disinvestment from and privatization of the public sector enterprises. There had been a marked decline in the growth rate of total employment in organized sector in the 1990s as compared to the 1980s. In fact, this period is known as a period of jobless growth. And labor laws relating to job security, they were changed, and many workers had been pushed out of jobs under the voluntary retirement schemes. So a practice of using contract and casual labor in place of regular employees has become widespread. And there were strikes by trade unions to protect the interest of workers in state electricity boards, the ITDC hotels, banks, etc. A National Renewal Fund was created as early as 1992 to provide a social safety net to the labor force rendered jobless. In 1994, uh, the government of India signed the In 1994, the government of India signed the Uruguay round of General Agreement on Trade, on Tariffs and Trade, that is GATT, at Maracas in Morocco, Africa, and became a member of the World Trade Organization, WTO. This step of the government could be seen as part of the new economic policy. As per conditions of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, developing countries, including India, were under obligation to introduce subsidies discipline. They were being asked to keep subsidies to the farmers up to 10% of their value of output. But cutting down on subsidies was a difficult proposition because the government because the government did not want to displease the rich farmers. Hence, cutting down on subsidies was a difficult proposition. They continued to get things like irrigation waters and electricity either free or at a throwaway prices. Another GATT related problem faced by farmers was introduction of patenting in agriculture. The farmer was not automatically permitted to use farm-saved seeds of protected varieties to sow the next crop. He had either to pay compensation for the use of seeds saved by him or obtain the approval of the breeder. As most of the plant breeders are the multinational corporations, MNCs, their primary intention is maximization of profit. This leaves the farmers no option but to buy the seeds again. Farmers in Karnataka attacked the farm of Kargil seeds to register their anger. There were also protests against terminated seeds of cotton in Maharashtra and Gujarat. The response of the rich farmer movement to new developments like new economic policy, India joining World Trade Organization, has not been undifferentiated. While Sharad Joshi in western part of the country had supported the new developments, Mahendra Singh Tikat in the north and Nanjuda Swami in the south were critical of it. Now let us discuss the 13th unit, that is secularism. The secularism is one of the most crucial issues of the world in the current political scenario in the world. Yuval Noah Harari, the author of 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, includes secularism amongst 21 most urgent issues of the 21st century. In India too, secularism has also been at the core of academic and popular and political discourse. Some questions are often raised about secularism, about its relationship with religion, state and other institutions, faith, religious communities, place of individual democratic values such as freedom and equality, about religion and ethical values. What is secularism? So the central issue in secularism is religion. Secularism in a society implies that the religious supremacy of a community does not lead to discrimination and persecution of religious minorities. Meaning of secularism depends on the extent of relationship religion has with the attributes mentioned above, that is relationship with religion, state and other institutions, faith, religious communities, place of individual, democratic values such as freedom and equality, about religion and ethical values. There are three meanings of secularism according to different perspectives. One talks about the relationship between the religion and the state. The second is about the impossibility of applicability of secularism in India. The third is about equal respect to all religions, or Sarv Dharm Sambhav. These perspectives have been reflected in the debate within the Constituent Assembly as well, and the popular and academic discourse in India as well. The debate on secularism in the Constituent Assembly has revolved around all or some of these issues. According to Rajiv Bhargava, success of secularism depends on certain factors. These are democracy and independence of the state from pressure of classes and ethnic groups in society, which again depends on presence of state. Democracy depends on pacification of politics, that is peaceful competition or competition without violence. In fact, secularism is associated with values which are linked with democracy and equal citizenship. Yuval Noah Harari underlines that in a secular society, people belonging to different faiths, Hindus, Christians, Muslims, and atheists, follow a certain ethical codes. Secularism can also Secularism can also prevail in a secular state. What is a secular state? In D.E. Smith's model in India as a secular state can be identified by its dealing with three subjects: exclusion of state in relationship between individual and the religious liberty, relations between individual and state in which religion is excluded, individual and citizen, and state neutrality. In Smith's perspective, India has prospects of success of democracy. Characteristics of secularism are present in Hinduism. However, there have been challenges in consolidation of secular state in India, caste and community laws, which could easily turn into communal rivalry and conflict. So Galanter finds Smith's model of Indian secularism unconvincing. Countering Smith, he contends that Indian state departs from principles of secularism by giving subsidies to religious schools and bodies pro-Hinduism and compromising its secular credentials. For him, precondition for a separate state to succeed in presupposing normative conception of religion with capacity to judge and evaluate. In his opinion, the compromise in India on secularism could be visible in the Constituent Assembly debate on liberty, religious, whether the state should recognize only linguistic minorities or linguistic minorities as well, or religious minorities as well. On citizenship, that is universal civil code, religion-based political reservation, and on state neutrality, whether the state should give instructions in the state-aided school. Akhil Bilgrami contests the notion of secularism as merely states neutrality and equidistance from different religions. Bilgrami rejects this notion and provides alternative notion. He argues that secularism does not emerge in all historical contexts. It emerges in some contexts. It emerges where there is a threat of majoritarianism. It can also emerge in the contexts which are not fully modernist. Secularism is different from secular and secularization. Secularism is a political doctrine. A person may remain secular simultaneously retaining his/her religious identity. Secularism in the Indian Constitution. So Indian Constitution did not include the word secularism when it commenced on 26 January 1950. Although secularism was not mentioned in the Constitution, the fact that independent India became a democracy, secularism was implied in it as a cardinal principle, a fait accompli, not needing its mention, but it was incorporated in the preamble of the Constitution by 42nd Constitutional Amendment in 1976. Later, the Supreme Court ruled in the S.R. Bommai judgment that secularism is a basic feature of the Constitution in 1994. Besides provisions in Article 25 to 30 protecting the rights of religious minorities in the Constitution emerged from debate in the Constituent Assembly of India. These signify values of secularism. The questions whether word secularism should be included in Indian Constitution and what kind of secular state India needed to become, whether separation of state from religion was a testimony for secularism, whether a secular state was contingent on a secular society, or whether state that respects all religions equally meant presence of secularism in India, were discussed in the Constituent Assembly on October 17, 1949. And the opinions on these questions were divided in the Constituent Assembly. Finally, the Assembly decided to not include the word secular in the preamble. However, there was an agreement among all members to establish India as a secular state, and most of them agreed that separation of religion and state was related to democratization of society. So Shefali Jha has identified three alternative arguments on secularism, which were debated in the Constituent Assembly. She terms the first argument as no concern theory of secularism. The proponents of this argument argued that religion should not be of concern of the state, and religion is a private affair, and there should be separation between religion as a private affair and the state as a public affair. People have liberty to practice religion as a private affair. The state should recognize an individual as a citizen, not as a person from a religion. The principal representative of this argument were K.T. Shah, Tajamul Hussain, and M. Masani. The Minu Masani line of suggestion and state should be separated, but their argument was just opposite to first alternative. The third theory which Shefali described was equal respect theory of secularism, argues that since in India religion was most important part of people's life, the state should respect all religions equally along with maintaining a equidistance from all religions. So, these are the broad arguments in the Constituent Assembly, and finally, it was decided that the state should respect all religions equally, and there should be Sarv Dharm Sambhav, since religion is a personal affair, and it should be kept separated from the public affairs. So, thank you so much for joining today's class. And we have just 2 units today, Unit 12 and Unit 13. We shall discuss Unit 14 and 15 in the next class. Thank you.